life of David. We started this a few weeks ago, and so it started out the story. David was anointed to be king, one of the least likely to be king, but that's who God chose. God chose David, and he said to Samuel that God looks at the inside, not just the outside. So we see that God chose David because David had a heart for God. And then he conquered the giant Goliath. And we learned about that story, how we fight from victory. We're already victorious. God has already given us everything that we need. And then Saul, the current king, so David's anointed to be king, but he's not king yet. Saul's the king. Saul starts trying to kill David. And we talked about that season. And then even a couple weeks ago, we talked about where David came to the cave of Adullam, where he wrote some of the Psalms, and he learned about God as his refuge. And he begged God to get him out of the caves and the wilderness and running from Saul. Well, we're skipping a lot to get to where we're at today. And basically, Saul, the king, he commits suicide, and then David becomes the king. And the fugitive became a king. The shepherd becomes a warrior, and he has established his kingdom. God has given him victory over his enemies and blessed him with influence, power, success. And then we get to 2 Samuel chapter 11. And we see here that maybe we thought David's greatest battle was running from Saul and in the caves and all that. But really one of his biggest battles comes from the palace season when he's king. And David survived adversity, but would he survive this prosperity that he has now? This power, this influence, this control that he has. So this story that we're going to talk about today is the kind of the TMZ situation. It's the Real Housewives of Israel version. So if you're a youngin', buckle up because this is PG-13. 2 Samuel chapter 11, it'll be fine. Chapter 11, verse 1. It says, in the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. Then they destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. Okay? Now, I don't know if you know what it's like if you're married with kids, when everybody leaves the house and you're just there alone. It doesn't happen hardly ever for me right now. But when it does, there's something that happens in the heart of a man when he is left alone. I mean, the laundry piles up. It's takeout every night. It's just, as one of my best friends says, when the cat's away, the mice will play. When wives go out of town, you just kind of do whatever you want, you know. And so we see here David was alone. He was basically left alone with no accountability. He was supposed to be off at war. In verse 2, one evening David got up from his bed and walked around on the roof of the palace. From the roof he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful, and David sent someone to find out about her. And the man said, she is Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah the Hittite. Her name was Bathsheba, and she was bathing. Isn't that ironic? I did some research to find out the correlation there. There is none. It's just interesting irony. I don't know. Then David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. Now she was purifying herself from her monthly uncleanness. So we have the TMZ and we have the TMI, all right? Then she went back home, and the woman conceived and sent word to David saying, I am pregnant. So David sent this word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite. That was her husband. And Joab sent him to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked him how Joab was, how the soldiers were, and how the war was going. You know, just small talk. Then David said to Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet. So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king was sent after him. But Uriah slept at the entrance to the palace with all his master's servants and did not go down to his house. David was told Uriah did not go home. So he asked Uriah, haven't you just come from a military campaign? Why didn't you go home? And Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my commander Joab and my Lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and make love to my wife? Hello. And as surely as you live, I will not do such things. So he's feeling convicted because all his men are out at war. And so he doesn't even feel good having a good time because he should be at war. And David's dealing with some more integrity than he has because he stayed home from the war. Then David said to him, stay here one more day, and tomorrow I will send you back. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. At David's invitation, he ate and drank with him, and David made him drunk. But in the evening, Uriah went out to sleep on his mat among his master's servants. He did not go home. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it to Uriah. In it, he wrote, put Uriah out in the front, where the fighting is the fiercest. Then withdraw from him, so he will be struck down and die. So while Joab had the city under siege, he put Uriah at a place where he knew the strongest defenders were. And when the men of the city came out and fought against Joab, some of the men in David's army fell. Moreover, Uriah the Hittite died. Okay, so in this story, this is the dark side. This is David's shadow side. We see the sin that took over David's life for a season. And it's sobering to read and to think about. I mean, he went from the refuge of the cave where he begged God to save him. Now God has saved him. Now he has all this influence, this power. But now he's tempted on a rooftop. And we get a glimpse into this side of David. I've heard this quote many times. I don't know who originally quoted it. But it's this: sin will take you farther than you want to go, keep you longer than you want to stay, and cost you more than you want to pay. Sin always multiplies and spreads. There's collateral damage. It affects people around him. And we see the web of sin that now David is caught up in. He was at the wrong place. He stared at the wrong thing. He used his power. He abused his power. He got into trouble. Now he's feeling the consequences of sin. Now he's gotten a lady pregnant. It's not his wife. She's married. He tries to manipulate her husband twice, once sober, once drunk. Now nothing's working, so he kills him. He doesn't kill him, he has him killed. He places him in an environment where he knows he will be killed. I mean, this is just messed up stuff. And we read this and we're like, oh my gosh, it's so horrible. But yet we see a little bit of that dark side in all of us. And maybe it's not as extreme. We're not killing people, having people, murdered, right? Right? Okay, good. Glad 60% of you nodded. But sin is so destructive. And we see, even with someone like David, who was a man after God's own heart, that's what Scripture says. We see so many great qualities about him. But what is sin? What is sin? Sin is any thought, attitude, desire, word, or action that goes against the will of God. I'll put it a little bit more plainly where we can actually remember. Sin is choosing our own way over God's way. And when we choose our own way, the sin starts to multiply. It starts to reproduce. Because you see, David, even when he was caught, he continued to manipulate and cover up. So it's not just breaking God's rules, it's rejecting God's authority. When we knowingly or unknowingly step outside of God's design and choose ourselves instead of trusting him. There's 3 problems that I see in this story. The first one is this. If you're taking notes, if you're ready, say I'm ready. David was not where he was supposed to be. He was not where he was supposed to be. Verse 1, in the spring of the year, when kings normally go out to war, he's supposed to be at war. However, David stayed behind in Jerusalem. So armies go off to battle in the spring, after all the crops are planted and the storms are over, kings are supposed to go off to war, but David stayed. And the battle he avoided on the outside turned into a battle on the inside. Because now he's isolated. The spiritual drift has become. He's disengaged his responsibilities. And we are the most vulnerable. Listen to this. We are the most vulnerable when we stop doing what God has called us to do. You take the purpose out of us, and boredom sets in. You take accountability away from us, trusted friends. You get disconnected from church, isolation, secrecy. That's when trouble starts. So David's sin didn't start with Bathsheba. Because no one wakes up one day and goes, I want to ruin my life. That's what I want to do today. Doesn't happen like that. It happens little by little. The drift starts to happen. Little small compromises. And it started in David's life when he abandoned his responsibility. David put himself in the wrong place. He was in the wrong place. He was in the palace on a rooftop, wandering around, bored, comfortable, looking down at other rooftops. I mean, this is where people bathed. It's not like this was a new thing that happened that day. This is the way they bathed. They had bathtubs on the roofs, and the sun would heat the water. That's where people bathed. So he maybe he knew what he was doing. What are your places where you should not be? There are places where temptation occurs. What are your places? Because we all have our thing. Is it the business trip? Is it the country club? Is it your laptop? Is it Amazon? Is it your ex's apartment? Is it doom scrolling late at night? Is it working late? Define your places of temptation and stay away. David put himself in the wrong place. He was not where he was supposed to be. And we are products of our environment. None of us are strong enough to battle the wrong place. The wrong place can make doing the wrong thing look like the right thing because we morph into our environment. I wrote this down in my notes. Don't put yourself in a place of personal temptation and expect God's strength. Sometimes it's not spiritual warfare. Sometimes it's not the devil's just after me. Sometimes it's we foolishly put ourselves in the wrong places. There are friends that lead us to the wrong places. There are jobs that lead us to the wrong places. Define your places. Ephesians 4:27, Paul told the church at Ephesus, said, do not give the devil a foothold. You ever heard a Christian say that? Don't give him a foothold. You're like, cool, yeah, sure. Don't give the devil a foothold. Well, the Greek word translated foothold literally means a place or a space. So it could read like this. Do not give the devil a place. Don't give the enemy room to tempt you. How many of you ever been rock climbing? Okay, a few of you. I've been rock climbing one time, and one time only, because I am so scared of the heights. And I don't even know if you could call what I did rock climbing. I went with people to rock climb and tried and failed. I got scared and said, get me down from here. Imagine my big body, all whatever, hooked up, and I think I'm 100 feet in the air. I'm probably more like 12 feet in the air. And I'm looking for places, and I'm bottom heavy, and I'm just scared. But I'm competitive, so I'm like, I can do this, but I'm scared. And I look down, and it's like, wow, that's miles down there. It was probably like 15 feet, and I couldn't do it. I said, bring me down, like I'm hungry, whatever. And that was my rock climbing experience. But a foothold, a climber, a rock climber, they're looking for a foothold. They're looking for a space where they can continue on, a spot where they can continue to have access. And in our lives, we got to be careful about the small spaces, the small places where we give the enemy access, where we give the enemy a foothold. Because these major implosions, explosions, and midlife crisis, and all the things, all these sins, it starts with the small compromises, the small footholds. And in this teaching in Ephesians 4, do not give the devil a foothold, Paul is saying, shut those little doors of sin. Shut them off. Sin doesn't just happen in one moment. We give access to sin step by step. This is what David did. He stayed home. He lingered on a rooftop of his palace, looking around. He stared at what he shouldn't have stared at. He kept looking. He asked about her. He sent for her. He abused his power. He slept with her. He covered it up. He committed murder. The progression is a progression that we can learn from. And there's a story in the Bible, a man named Joseph. And the Bible says that Joseph was well built and handsome. Do we have any men in the room that would be so confident like Joseph Elder? Do we have any well built, handsome men? Or is it just Joseph? Okay. It's the loudest amen I've ever heard. Well, Joseph was in charge of Potiphar's household. And Potiphar was one of Pharaoh's officials in Egypt. And in Genesis 39, it says this: one day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. Wrong place. She caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." Cougar alert. By the way, I'm fascinated by mountain lions, the animal. But don't ever Google cougars in Arkansas, okay? Just want you to learn from my mistakes, okay? Bringing it back. She said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. We see right here a great method for avoiding the wrong places. You run. There are things that we need to fight against, and there are things we need to flee. David was in the wrong place. He was not where he was supposed to be. What are your wrong places? What are your places of temptation? Number two, David wanted what he could not have. He wanted what he could not have. Are we going to recover? I don't know. He wanted what he could not have. Just thought that would be, you could learn from my mistakes. When kids are young, you tell them I'll do something. The whole, don't touch the stove. And they're like, okay. And as soon as you turn your back, they're like, the mischievous grin. There was a famous psychology experiment called the marshmallow test, where they would sit a child down and put a marshmallow there and say, you can eat it now, or you can wait till I come back and you can have two. And so then the adult would leave the room. And then the child would, sometimes they'd pick it up and they'd smell it and they'd visualize it. And a lot of them eventually just eat it because of the gratification. They just wanted it right then rather than wait and have two. And we see that's exactly what happened to David. A moment of temptation, and he traded future faithfulness. He traded blessing for immediate gratification. He saw something he wanted. It did not belong to him. But instead of trusting God, walking away, or waiting, he took it. And he took it by force. And we all have these, marshmallow moments where we just want what we want. We just we see something, we feel like we deserve something, and we just gratify our flesh. Verse 4 said, David sent messengers to get her, and when she came to the palace, he slept with her. David finally has power, and then he abuses it. He waited so long for this position, and he abused his position. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. He took what was not his. He disobeyed the Lord. He succumbed to his craving and his desires. In 1 John chapter 2, for everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever. He got wrapped in by the lust of the eyes. He saw something he wanted. He was alone. He had people to go make this happen, and he did it. I wrote this down in my notes. What you feed grows, and what you starve dies. What are you feeding your desires? What are you feeding your soul? The danger, it wasn't just that David fell into sin. The danger is the way that he was so comfortable hiding it and covering it up. When we get to point number 3, write this down. David covered what he should have confessed. He covered. So sometime later, David's in the palace. He just had this little rendezvous, and he's checking his Instagram. He gets a DM. It's from Bathsheba, and she says in all caps, "I am pregnant." And David's heart sank. And he goes into freak out mode, and he starts doing what a lot of us have done, a lot of us might do, a lot of people I've seen in my life do. When they're caught, instead of confessing, they cover it up, manipulate, pile sin upon sin. And that's what happens here. You ever notice how bad kids are at covering up? Pierce, I remember when you were a youngin', and we had Lunchables in the fridge, and Lunchables, some of them will come with like a double stuffed Oreo. So sometimes I go to the fridge, I just noticed the Lunchable was open, and the meat, the cheese, and the crackers were there, but the cookie's gone. At one time, I was like, I feel like this is fresh fingerprints, So I couldn't find Pierce anywhere. This is just a couple years ago. No, I'm kidding. And I go underneath the dining room table, and he's there like, I'm like, do you have an Oreo? He's like, and there's Oreo crumbs all over his mouth. It's hilarious. Kids are horrible at covering things up. And Numbers 32, verse 23 says, but if you fail to keep my word, then you will have sinned against the Lord. Check this out. And you may be sure that your sin will find you out. Confessions is so great. We're going to talk about that more next week. Because you're not hiding anymore. You're not in secret anymore. Uriah the Hittite, let's talk about him for a second as we close. He was one of David's mighty men. David had 30 men who were his mighty men. Wouldn't it be cool to have some mighty men? Maybe we all should have some mighty men. And these were his loyal soldiers. These were not random soldiers. These were the 30 of his most elite warriors who fought with him in the caves, the wilderness seasons, the battles that got him where he was at when Saul was hunting him. These are the people that had his back. They risked their lives for David repeatedly. And Uriah is listed as one of these mighty men in 2 Samuel chapter 23. Uriah was not a stranger to David. It wasn't some random soldier. They were friends. And David betrayed him. And it makes the betrayal even darker to know that he wasn't just some random soldier, he was his friend. And not only did he sleep with his wife, get her pregnant, but then he tried to make it look like it was his son, He tried that twice, one sober, one drunk. And then he's like, I guess I'll just have him in an environment where he is killed. And he arranges for that to happen. And Uriah's a real man. I mean, he's got real emotions. He was a real person. He was out fighting for his country, fighting for David. And sin almost never stays contained. It just kind of continues to grow, multiply, and affect people if it remains secret. And these private compromises that David committed ended up being public humiliation. What began in the eyes eventually took over his heart, because he didn't just lust. He committed adultery, he covered it up, committed murder. Proverbs 28 verse 13 says, whoever conceals his sins does not prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy. And David, he thought he had buried the evidence. But you can't hide from God. And next week we'll see David's restoration, David's confrontation. In chapter 11, verse 26, it says, when Uriah's wife, Bathsheba, heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. After the time of mourning was over, David had her brought to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing David had done displeased the Lord. In my life, I've done many, many things that have displeased the Lord. And it's a place you never want to be. But it's a place that you find yourself sometimes. And I've sat in front of many, many people being a pastor for the last 22 years. And majority of my role, my calling, my job is to encourage people, teach the Bible, shepherd people. But part of that is asking questions. Sometimes part of that is confronting people when something has happened. And it's just crazy how many people, when they're caught in a lie, they lie. Caught in a lie, and they spiral and continue trying to cover it up instead of just coming right out and confessing. And I mean, just over the years, it's just way better just to come clean, to be innocent before the Lord, to ask for forgiveness. I mean, David didn't plan to be an adulterer and a murderer. We know David at this point. We know him. This is not his heart, right? This is his foolishness. He put himself in a place where he was not supposed to be. And then he started craving something he knew he couldn't have. And then instead of confessing, he covered it up. He took someone else's life to cover sin. But Jesus gave his life to cover our sin. He sent Uriah to die. And Jesus himself died in our place. You see this comparison. David hid in secrecy, but Jesus stepped into the light and carried our shame publicly on the cross. And sin covers people in shame, and Jesus covers people in grace. So we see, even in this story, the grace of God. 3 questions, 3 application, things I want you to think about this week. And then I want to pray. What are your, not your spouse's, not your friend, I'm talking about you. What are your places of temptation? Identify them, stay away, okay? What do you crave that you can't have? Know yourself. What do you crave that you can't have? And then the 3rd application, what do you need to confess? Are there any sins, any mistakes that you need to confess to God, possibly confess to someone? What do you need to confess? Do you have a secret? Your sins will find you out. So it's better to just confess, ask for forgiveness, and live a clean, pure, innocent life. It is a joy. You can't buy it, can't purchase it, You can't earn it, but the peace that comes from knowing Jesus, and not only knowing Jesus, but knowing that you are clean and pure and innocent and you have nothing to hide, to go to sleep at night every day. Lay your head on that pillow every night, knowing that you're at peace with God. Oh, it's the best. I've lived without it. Now I'm living with it, and it's the best. Would you bow your head?